Okay, we're going to talk about grading and drainage. This is a similar course to what we had available 2 years ago, but we don't simply repeat it. We don't change the number and repeat it. So we've tried to update it some so you've got some information that's new. The standards of practice, of course, that's the basis of any of our inspections. We'll address that. We'll talk about how to report, some things to see, and then we'll just look at some field examples there. All right. I like to show this slide in every presentation that I make. Are you seeing this? It's not advancing on my preview. Are you seeing it?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
It's on Brenda's computer. Anybody else? Can you see it? Everybody else is.
I'm seeing it as well.
Good. Okay. Good. I think now it's happening. So I put this in every presentation because I think there are a lot of times that people just don't really think about what the actual definition by the standard of practice is. Adversely and materially affects the performance of a system or a component. We see a lot of things, and we have to keep emphasizing that it's not a code inspection. But the reality is there are a lot of people out there, and talking about our clients, that expect it to be exhaustive. They expect us to find absolutely everything, and they think it's just reasonable that it's a code inspection. But when we're out there and writing these reports, we need to think about the fact that we can point something out that is technically wrong, but simply not material. But that next item is a hazard to life, limb, or property. You know, about everything we do, we can look at and say, well, drainage, grading, those can damage the property. We can have problems with high water that can be, could injure or hurt us and even kill us. So constitutes a hazard to life, limb, or property can be applied to so many things. Just think about those things. Standard practice. This is one of the smallest areas in the SOP when we're talking about a system. There's just not a whole lot in the SOP that addresses grading and drainage. It's a huge topic, but the SOP is very small. You shall report as deficient or drainage. You shall report as deficient problems with that high soil, and you shall report as deficient deficiencies in gutters and downspouts. All of those things can affect the structure, especially the foundation. You're not required to look at flat work or detention or retention ponds unless they can actually, the slope of the house can affect that. You're not required to determine the hydrology or the presence of underground water. We all know that we can't see underground. The clients expect us to have a magic 8-ball though. And we don't have to determine the efficiency or performance of underground or surface drainage system. I love to see the drainage, but there's no way that we really have of testing it. I have, I'll talk about that in a little while, but it's not practical. The impact of water over time can be beautiful. There are times that I listen to that sort of music at night to help me sleep, especially after long conversations with Paul. That's absolutely beautiful. And even this that looks dry is beautiful. And the things that water can shape are wonderful. And even this oddball looking stuff, you think about that and the water that goes through and what it takes, the force it takes. But what happens when that water begins to impact your home? There are a lot of things that hit the news for us. And every time you see one of these, we've had some of this, I think, on Lake Trinity. There was one not too long ago, and I believe it was the 2017 Harvey event. Wimberley, there was a house washed away from the banks. I was particularly cognizant of that because my kids were camping down in Wimberley, and the police came up on them and honked their sirens and said, get out. Don't wait. If you can't get your stuff in the car immediately, just get in the car and go. And they were 5 minutes ahead of being unable to get out. And at the same time, there was another house that was washed over with a mother and 2 kids. This at the cliffside, it's beautiful, but I think they deserve everything they get if that's where they're going to build their house. You have the impact of the ocean. You have the impact of rivers. You have the impact of just time and soil separation. So let's talk about soils. There are different types of soil classification, and it's actually a science. And each of those soils have well-defined property, and every soil has a soil type. And it's important that the type of soil be considered in every construction. There's a temple that actually has an outline of soil classifications. So this is something that's been known for years. They talked about it, they documented it, and here it said, before you go to build something, determine what kind of soils they are so that you can build according to that. The best translation of the inscription was, did you check the soil report, you dumbhead? We all know there's faults. I'm from the Gulf Coast area. We have the Bel Air section of town that has faults, and they've had to change some of their building practices to account for that, and you can't build there without adhering to those practices. We have the Woodlands, which I remember when they started it, it was huge, it was beautiful, it was expensive, but now they can come in and see fault lines, and you can go in the neighborhood for inspections and just see house after house along that fault that's got problems. When you have expansive soils, well, when you have any type of soils, you have to adhere to its bearing capacity. We don't do anything with soil reports, so we can't anticipate problems because of poor bearing on the soils. We can't anticipate problems. We don't know what the engineering went into that. But the idea is that foundation problems that we see can be caused by those soils. The SOP says, well, actually, the standards of practice for agents and inspectors says that you must be geographically competent. Now, where it says that is specifically for agents and brokers, but the subtext is that it's for all licensees, so that would be us. So that means that as inspectors, we need to know the soil types that we're dealing with, roughly, not specifically, and just be able to anticipate the impact that can be having on the homes that we're inspecting. The most common types are the 3 major classifications. We have coarse grained soils, that's sands and gravels. The downside of being able to not able to talk to you, this is where I would ask you what kind of soils are in your area. I made a joke before some of you came on that I'm going to find out who's the furthest away, and that's what I'm going to enter as my mileage today for my travel. We have fine-grained soils and organic soils. Here along the Gulf Coast, at least where I'm at, we have the silts and clays, and those are extremely expansive. We're not going to talk about this at all, except I want you to see the interaction of the type of soils, the plasticity. That's a lot of work to calculate. There's a lot of testing that goes on the soils. And we don't have any of that information when we're doing our inspection. Expansive soils. Now that's, like I said, here along the Gulf Coast, north, and I would imagine the Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, where there's all the rocks. I don't know the impact because I'm not geographically competent on that type of soil for the house that's being built. But down here with the expansive soils, we know the impact of the water on those soils. If it's allowed to sit, the soil swells, it can impact the foundation, then it dries, it shrinks, which can impact the foundation. You have that constant movement, and that movement through a change in volume can be quite damaging. Because you have a cycle of wet and dry soils, it's a constant motion. It constantly swells and it shrinks and it swells and it shrinks. Well, let's think about that 10%. You know, that 10% doesn't seem so significant. You just have a little bit of movement there. That's 10% of that size. But let's take the house footprint. That 10% is much more material. And that's what the houses that we deal with are seeing in structural or in impact due to water. And that's quite significant. And we talk about the different type of expansive soil. So I show you that this map, it's extremely high where it's red. And I said San Antonio and Austin, but I see that they're part of the expansive soils. But you get up into Fort Worth and the West Texas area, it's less expansive. Mount Pleasant is it's not near far enough for me to count for my mileage. I'm looking for somebody further away, but thank you. 1/4 of all the homes in the US have been damaged by expansive soils. It means 1 in 4 houses you're looking at, just based on averages, can have some impact. And that impact in terms of financial loss is more than earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes. So that means all of those weather events, all those quote unquote acts of God, don't have the impact of the slow and steady shrinking and swelling of the soils. Report as deficient. Drainage around the foundation that's not performing. Well, where do we get the standards for performance? We have it in the IRC, the IBC, Stormwater Management, Federal Housing Authority, and the American Society of Civil Engineers. We'll go into that again a little later. But generally, water runs away from the structure. It does not run onto other property. It runs to the street and then the storm sewer, or just runs to the storm sewer. So essentially, we can say that water runs downhill. All right, I think we have time for questions and then we're done. Well, maybe there's more detail than that.
Yeah, I haven't seen any questions yet. If you gals have any questions you want to put in the chat box, go ahead and we'll monitor those things as we go and get Clay to answer them for us.
Otherwise, we'll be early. El Paso, that's good. That's good mileage. Thank you.
And if you joined us late as to the meeting, please put in your name and your full name, your truck number, so we can get you credit for this class.
Since we don't have some of that information, we're looking at these houses on one day, and we don't necessarily know what the impact of the rain was the day. In my report, I'll make a comment that there was or was not rain within 3 days, the past 3 days. I'll make a comment about whether it was a large amount or a small amount. But I have to do that based on information on the house I'm inspecting, because I might travel 50 miles. And that certainly can have an impact on the rainfall. I've traveled 10 miles and they told me it rained yesterday, but my house was as dry as could be. So in my report, I start out the grading and drainage section like this. It's my evaluation is based on observations at the time of the inspection, and I'm not doing elevations. I'm not using a level, even though I have a picture later where I did, and I'm not using equipment. I'm simply standing back and I'm taking a look at the property and I'm trying to decide if that looks like it drains well or not. And frankly, for the most part, we can look at that and see that it will or won't. But when I'm talking to the client and I say to them, best I can tell, it looks like water's going to run away. But the only way to tell is send your wife out during a heavy storm and have her take a look at it. And then when the water stops falling, you need to see about how long it stays. How long will the water stand against the house to allow that 10% swelling? And it does not, nor would other methods of evaluation serve to ensure heavy rainfall or rainstorm events would drain properly and not create water damage within the dwelling. I did an inspection in the Kingwood area, and that's northeast Houston. It's about 40 miles from me. I was doing the inspection and they had all sorts of underground drains. The house was sort of a U shape, and I could tell that they'd done an awful lot of work in that U shape to shape the water runoff. They put in underground drains with a surface drain box of about 16 inches by 16 inches. And we sat there and talked about it. And I said, because of all the work done, I suspect they've had rain problems or drainage problems. And I can't tell you how this will work. Now, 30 minutes later, we got a deluge of water that actually flooded the streets for about 4 hours. And we were doing our inspection, came back to that area, and there was 2 inches of water in the house. If I had simply walked off, this is my disclaimer, and it might have protected me to some degree, but it certainly wouldn't have made my client happy. And it just so happened that the rain event was able to show that they did have problems and all of their solutions didn't work. In this particular case, that nice sized box, there was no protection against the leaves, and all the leaves washed over it, blocked it, and it went into the house.
Clay, we do have a question for you.
Soaker hoses aren't required anywhere. It's a good idea. And there are a lot of different ways I hear a lot of different people tell me how to install them, but I think it's consistent that you don't put them immediately against the slab. You put them about 12 inches out and 12 inches down. For the most part, if I see a soaker hose, they've just run it around the house on top of the soil. And then the other problem with that is that they're not consistent in watering. They don't have a timer on there, so they'll turn it on one day, flood it, wait 6 weeks, and turn it on again. Soaker hoses aren't required. They're a very good idea if you use them properly. I had a client who called me a year after the inspection and said that they had a crack. And of course, the first thing I did was look at my report, and I said, yes, that crack existed. And I pointed it out, I documented it, and I put a scale on it so you could see exactly how wide the crack was. And I made recommendations about all the vegetation against the house and how that was taking water out of the soil and there was no watering of the foundation. And I asked them if they'd corrected anything. No, they hadn't. So I suggested that they take care of that. A month later, I called them and they said, yes, it fixed the problem. 2 months later, they called back and said the crack showed up. What did you do different? Well, we stopped watering. You can give them advice. You can't make them take the advice. Water will always run downhill. And sometimes the volume of water, you just can't keep up with it. And that's when you're going to have the water problems inside the house. Do not create berms or dams to hold water in the garden beds. How many times have you seen a garden bed placed in front of the house and it's a great big berm? So you have a trench on the house side and that traps all the water, especially when they don't have any gutters or downspouts. So, and then the water runs down the side of the house into there. They have simply created a condition that makes it worse, not better. On place fences. You might have a very nice swale, and then somebody comes in and they build a fence, and there's so much water running off, they have a gap between the bottom of the fence and the soil, and their dogs get out, so they start damming it up. And the water comes in, it can't get past that fence, and it's going to hold it longer than it should, affecting the foundation. And you can see cracks in that area caused by the water dam. And do monitor yard spaces for proper drainage. A lot of people put off landscaping, or they have somebody else do their landscaping until they just absolutely have to. And you can have terrible drainage that you just don't recognize because nobody goes out after heavy rain. Nobody goes out during the heavy rain, and nobody goes out a day after the heavy rain, just to see how long it takes, how long that water stands there. Well, what's the impact that can have?
Look at the big divot there on the left. It's the water rushing down and pulling all the dirt away. That is insane.
That's an extreme event, but it can happen. When we talk about the geography of drainage, there are a lot of different types, and this is a large scale. But I think if you think about it, you can imagine a neighborhood that might have this same type of problem. So if we look at this trellised type of drainage system, where would you imagine that it would be the worst place for a home to be? How about right there? All the water seems to be running down towards that central area. It's running from the ridges on both sides. Well, I have seen neighborhoods where the ridge is a park that has been built up, or the ridge is a berm between a street and the first row of houses, and that was done as a sound barrier. And all of that trapped the water. Now, they did have drainage, and they did have detention ponds and retention ponds, but it simply didn't provide all the help that they needed. They still had flooding. And sometimes that flooding is what it takes to recognize that there were problems. Dendritic. So where would you think that the problems for the housing would be here? It's pretty much going to be wherever those tributaries come down, and you have enough of that, and you get the river swelling, and then it all just moves down, and the downstream of that is the big problem. Rectangular. Every place that you have those little tributaries meeting another river section. Radial. And it's just everything downhill. everything downstream. And this is just the opposite. It all goes to the center. Water runs downhill. And that's a big picture of the geography of the landscape. And you can see where the impact is on houses. But now let's talk about houses. That's a swale. That's a type A swale. And you see that it comes from the back fence down to the low part of the back swale. It comes from the house down to the back, the low spot of the back swale. And it runs around the house and it goes out to the street. That is the most common type of drainage that you're going to see, because it's all of those that are not on the corner. There's a different type of drainage pattern for those. Now, what I like about this is they have the gutters and downspouts that go underground, or actually don't go underground in this case, but that runs down to the swale. And you'll actually see that each of those downspouts that are illustrated extend out past the wall. It's supposed to go 5 feet past the foundation, but the reality is it never does. So this is type A drainage. The problems that we see sometimes is people begin their landscaping and they bring in sod to take care of low spots. They don't like the low spot between houses, so they fill those low spots up with water. I'm sorry, with sod and soil to get rid of the water. And what they have done there is eliminate the drainage design. Type A drainage all runs around the house and towards the street. The swale is supposed to have a 10-foot radius. Frankly, I don't know that I ever see much of that. I'm lucky if there is a radius on the side. The rear swale is what is lost a lot. And that protective rear slope is generally where the fence is. And then the fence starts having problems and they start adding soil. It makes all sorts of additional problem. This drainage type, by the way, is a lot grading illustration from FHA and HUD. This is their depiction and description of the design.
Clay, we do have another question there if you look at it.
It does, it's not specific. It's simply, I'm sorry, everybody can see the question. Does the SOP or the IRC require inspection of the grading within 10 foot of the foundation or the entire lot? IRC doesn't require inspection. The SOP requires that you inspect grading and drainage, and there is no differentiation between the first 10 feet and the second 10 feet. What you're looking for is the impact on the house. And that impact can be caused by something that's 20 foot away. So no distinction. Now you'll see in this house, this type B, and again from HUD, it doesn't have a house behind it, or that house behind it is so far away that they can take advantage of that slope and get it away. But the house sides and front drain towards the street. And this is the type C. This would be typically a corner lot. You see that on the sides it drains sort of towards the side. They have a high spot in the front, sort of trapping that water, and it runs to the back. I see these in more rural areas where they have a ditch at the front, and then they have a berm. So the water from the street goes into the ditch and runs off and not into the houses. And generally that back slope is far enough away, or they have a long enough lot. And again, that's generally in the rural areas where they're big lots.
Got another question pop up there, Clay.
The IRC says it is a 6-inch drop over the first 10 feet. And that works out to be about, talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, I think we lost you there for a minute. Yeah, the first 10 feet should have a slope on it. And you know, sometimes you don't get that because there's fences or neighbors or houses too close to each other. You can't get the slope that you need, but the main thing is it slopes away from the house and away from the house. Just depending on the lot size, like Clay's been showing us here. So good presentation, Clay.
There you see in the right side, now this is in meters, but there's the 5% slope, which is your 6 inches and 10 feet. All right, so let's talk about how you mitigate poor drainage. French drains. Now, I think just out of habit, everybody calls every drainage system a French drain. But a French drain is not the same as a subsurface or an underground drain. A French drain is basically a trench, and it's got materials in it that will prevent or attempt to prevent the erosion as water comes down there. You saw the pictures at the beginning, the impact of that water on erosion, the impact of water causing the erosion, which caused the landscape to change. So these are all the different names for it. But I think if you simply call it a French drain versus an underground or subsurface drain, you're going to be, you'll be okay. And French drains came from, this is crazy, it came from France. I know that's probably a surprise to everybody, but this was their drainage system. They had these huge ditches. They filled them with rock, and all the water along the sides would run into that drain. And that means you'd pick up that water anywhere along the border of the French drain. Now that's pretty good. You see on the French drain on the large picture on the left, you have water running down into that trench filled with rock to prevent it from going down that slope towards the house. That is not a barrier so much as it is very shallow French drain, and you see it's effective because that soil hasn't eroded. You've got some spots, but it just hasn't eroded the way you might expect if it were running down that hill and simply across. The one at the top, also very shallow. The one lower down, we don't know how deep any of that rock goes. I have seen these in homes where I've actually been able to go down, and I could show the client to some small degree in isolated areas just how deep the trench was and how much the rock was, and it created a nice drainage field. You still had to worry about the vegetation crawling across it or the vegetation washing down it, but it's a perfectly good drainage system. Now, an underground drain has localized catch basins. So you're not getting that water everywhere. And usually what you'll see is that the catch basins are placed in the drainage swale where they're having problems. Excuse me, where you're having problems. It can also be used to collect and channel water from a roof and gutter and downspout system. I did that myself at my home. I did it and finished it 3 months before Harvey in 2017. It cost me the materials and quite a bit of beer for my sons and their friends, but it got done pretty quick. And I didn't have any water problems at all during that. I couldn't get out of the neighborhood for 5 days, but I didn't have any flooding in my house, and that was the whole purpose. Neither did I have erosion from all that water runoff because I took it straight down into the underground drain system. Now you'll see on the left side, there is a wrap around the subsurface drain material. It's perforated. The foam wrap is what keeps, hopefully, or minimizes soils that go through there to keep it from clogging up. And it's all sitting on a bed of gravel. Yes, that does mean that you leach out some of the water from that underground drain as it's moving towards its final destination, but that keeps it from overwhelming the discharge point. In my particular case, and I'll show you the illustration of it in a little while, there's an awful lot of water that comes out there, a little 3 to 4 inch pop-up device, and that could not handle all of the water, and that's why the leach field. The other one doesn't have a leach field. That's solid pipe. That means it's trying to get all of that water that it picks up in the catch basins to whatever discharge point. No leaching at all. That is going to take a little longer to drain, as long as it's raining, as long as it's filling catch basins, because you've got them in series, and it's just going to overwhelm it. Now, I have seen these where the one, in this case, it'd be in the foreground, the water was coming out of it. It couldn't handle the volume, so the one in the back picked it up, it ran into the front, and it was just coming out like a storm water coming out of a sewer cover. You can see those big, heavy steel round covers lifted up by the flowing water. And then the one on the right is not perforated. It's that corrugated. They use that quite a bit for the guttering. So it's not really got much difference from that solid white pipe in the middle, except that now you've introduced all the corrugation, which can trap debris. Long-term impact, they might have to do some cleaning on those more often than the others. I have one catch basin that I haven't been able to locate. I know I installed it. But I just can't locate it because grass grew over it quicker than I could keep it down, and impacts the drainage there. When I said a while ago that you cannot test that in any real world condition, there have been times, and this is an extreme case. I wouldn't do this every time because frankly, it's outside the scope of our inspection. It takes a lot of time, and bluntly, I'm not getting paid for it. But there were several mitigating factors here. And I took a garden hose and I filled up a spot where I expected it to be in the back behind a fence. And I let it run long enough that we were able to find the concealed basin and see where the water ran out. They had some real problems, and it was just something I chose to do because I could. I had the time and I was willing. So what impact does drainage have on retaining walls? Well, first let's kind of define and look at how these retaining walls work. Look at the gravity wall. That works because the wall is heavy enough that it actually has a tilt towards the left by weight. The soil is pushing to the right, and the dirt itself keeps that, if it's well designed, it keeps it pretty stable. And you'll see that it does go beneath the soil level, but not a long way. That illustration doesn't say, but I would imagine that retaining wall is going to be 12 to 6 inches deep. Then you have piling wall. It's much narrower, and you'll look that it is driven much deeper. So it is the depth and the soils at that depth that keep it from leaning out. It is the counter impact of the soil on the right-hand side of that. And now let's look at the cantilevered wall. All of that soil is dropping down on the cantilever, which is holding it down to keep it from tilting. And it that's what's holding it in place. The weight on that cantilevered part. And then the anchored wall is where it's actually got anchors driven back 12 feet or so. And it's that anchor that's keeping it from leaning forward. In my house, the house was built in 2001. I'm sorry, 3. We moved in 2006. The detention pond is behind us, and that house had already lost about 12 foot of the soil just slipping down the slope, and the fence was almost at a 45-degree angle. That anchor would have helped, and we ended up building a bulkhead with anchors to keep it from moving over. All right, so that's the type of retaining wall. So what is it and when is it that we have to inspect it as a part of a structural system? Well, let's talk about first a foundation wall. You'll see that a 45-degree angle from the base of that beam goes down to the retaining wall. So if that retaining wall is at an intersection or even closer than that, then it is supporting the foundation, and that becomes a structural wall. You should be able to tell that in an inspection just because of how close it is. You might not know the depth of that beam, but you could probably come out to a pretty good estimate of it. So what about a landscaping wall? That wall does not meet that 45-degree angle. But what do we see sometimes that they do? Forget the retaining wall for a second, or the landscaping wall for a second. How many times have you seen them put a swimming pool right next to the house? And there are a lot of times they have a very small amount of yard space, usable yard space, and they'll put a lap pool, or they'll put a soaking pool, or it might be 5 foot away from the house, but the depth of the pool causes it to impact that. You weren't a part of the design. I strongly recommend that what you do there is you define what you're able to see and disclaim what you can't see, what you didn't design, what part of the design you don't know and can't deal with. You say, I have this pool. It might have an impact on the foundation because of water, expansive soils, collapse of the soils, impact on the pool wall, etc. So just because there is not a retaining wall, if they put a pool there, that pool wall becomes to some degree a retaining wall, whether it's landscape or structural. That will have a huge impact on the foundation if you're not careful. You were asking about the standards of practice. It is as simple as deficiencies in the drainage and deficiencies in the grade levels. You'll notice that there is no stipulation about how much clearance there is, any more than there was any stipulation in the standards of practice about what the drainage slope should be. Well, then it's up to you to decide. It's not a code inspection, but we certainly can go to code to see what that should be. And that's where we get that 5% or 6 inches and 10 feet. It's the same in the building code. Stormwater management is not the impact on the house, but stormwater management does address drainage for these subdivisions that are put in. In 2001, we had a tropical storm and a lot of flooding. And it was that storm that caused them, at least in this Gulf Coast area, to revise all of the floodplain tables and stipulate that any new subdivisions had to be developed with designated retention ponds or detention or retention ponds. And that's why you see all these subdivisions that are going up, and they all have this, what they call a water feature, and they have this beautiful lake, and they have trees, and sometimes it's got a rock border, sometimes it's concrete, sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it's overgrown. They have fountains, they have fish, they have docks, and they advertise it as this wonderful thing that they've done, so it looks great. But what they don't say is it's to keep the homes from flooding. And the amount of the capacity of that should be enough to catch all the water displaced by the concrete foundations that are put down. You no longer have a place where that water can be absorbed. It's going to run off. And so that's the purpose of those detention ponds. When wood siding, sheathing, and wall framing on the exterior of a building having a clearance of less than 6 inches from the ground or 2 inches measured vertically from concrete steps, porch slabs, patios, or similar horizontal surfaces. That is when not only you have to protect against decay, but that is the basis for our determining that grade is deficient. We use that 6 inches from organic materials, 4 inches from masonry to soil. We have, and that applies to the stucco as well, and then 2 inches. So your stucco should be at least 2 inches above the concrete steps, slabs, patio slabs. What they do is they have stucco and they build a flat work patio and they cover it. And what they've done is to reduce the amount of exposure of the slab there. So that is directly out of the IRC. That is the basis for determining that grading is not sufficient. So masonry and stucco, 4 inches. EIFS, not less than 6 inches. Wall board, whether it's the cementitious board, would be 6 inches, or even the old wood fiber board like masonite, that would be 6 inches. Of course, if you come across masonite there and it was less than 6 inches, it's probably decayed beyond belief, and they've probably already come in and replaced it with something like a cement board. Vinyl siding gets used to cover up, at least down here, again, geographic competency. I don't know what y'all would experience north of us, but we have a lot of vinyl siding that gets applied on top of homes that were built in the 70s with that cardboard siding. If it's covered with vinyl and you still have low clearance or small amount of clearance, I call it out because we don't know what's behind it. We can just almost guarantee that they overlaid it rather than replaced it. The whole purpose of them putting the vinyl on was save money. So what's the purpose of having all that good clearance? Got to protect the building materials, protect against water intrusion, and you try to eliminate the conditions that are conducive to WDI infestation. So if you have high soil, it's in contact with materials, that material is going to deteriorate. If you have high soils, especially in conjunction with poor drainage, you're going to have water that comes through. And then if you have the high soils, especially if it conceals weep holes or is concealing the lower edges of whatever type of siding, it's going to conceal the termite activity. And if we look over here at the termite activity, you see along this Gulf Coast, that has the very heaviest impact other than the coast of California there. I have the termite inspectors that'll come out and say, we saw them last week, we're going to find them this week. And you can just guarantee during the late March, early April, they start showing up and you see the swarmers. I had a case in April, brand new construction. Nobody was there but myself, and the tub was full of swarmers. And what I was concerned about, and did happen, except that I had a video of it, is that the builder simply went in there and cleaned out all the swarmers. If you can't see it, it never happened, right? So how do you mitigate high soil and poor drainage? Well, gutters and downspouts. Are gutters a code requirement? The code says that water runoff from the roof should extend 5 feet past the foundation. Well, unless you have a 5-foot overhang of the roof, and that simply doesn't happen, about the only thing you can do would put in gutters and downspouts, but that doesn't happen. Frankly, they just ignore the code. The authorities having jurisdiction don't do a thing about it. Most builders will put gutters over the front porch just so that somebody can walk into the house without getting deluged by water. And they'll offer new construction to put in gutters all the way around the house, but they charge so much that most clients that I deal with simply don't want it. And they say they'll do it later, which never happens. So we come in to do our inspection 10 years later and we see the effects of poor drainage. But if the gutters are there, other than simply recommending more, or that they be installed, or that they be replaced, we have to look at, are they installed correctly? They should slope and be free of leaks. If you ignore it, I don't care what it's made out of, sooner or later it's going to leak. And most people don't go out there to do the routine maintenance, much less something like this. And all they had to do was call Popeil, as seen on TV, and get some of that stuff to spray in there. But that doesn't happen. And we also have where it is sloping towards the middle and not towards the end. So water is trapped in the middle of that gutter system, accelerating corrosion, causing the downspouts, the gutter system to sag, pull the nails out. It should slope an eighth of an inch per foot. and water should not pool at any point in there. Well, what do you do with the water from the downspout? It shall not be drained to the sanitary sewer. That's your black water straight from the house. So you're not going to take that water runoff and go down into your sewer system. And that is simply because the sewer system doesn't have the capacity. Everything that goes down into the sewer system has to go to the municipal pump stations and cleaners. So they don't want that extra unsanitary water. Shall be diverted from a storage tank. Well, that's assuming that there's a storage tank. Shall discharge so it won't cause erosion or damage to the property. Well, even if you didn't have the downspouts, you're going to have to deal with that. So that's basically saying you should take all of your drainage system and make sure that you do your absolute best to make sure that it runs away safely. Roof drainage onto the AC condenser. If I see that there is no protection over the condenser, I've already recommended gutters and downspouts. If they don't choose to do that, quite often you'll see that angled aluminum, call it a splash guard, and it runs down there and hits. And while it should run to the side, a lot of times with enough volume from a steep enough roof, it just runs right over it. But recommending the gutter to protect it is my approach. But you certainly should note to the client that that water runoff over time can be an issue. Also, a lot of times you'll see gutters all the way around the lower eave, but you might have a second floor where the runoff from that second floor falls down onto a porch, patio, or lower roof. And over time, you can see the erosion. It just tears the granule, the aggregate off of that shingle. And now you've got a bare shingle that you've cost a lot of life. But you need to discharge all the water so it doesn't cause problems. Roof washers and debris excluders shall be provided with an automatic means of self-drainage and shall not drain onto roof surfaces. One of the reasons I like talking or teaching these courses is it takes quite a bit of time to do all the prep for it. But if you do it right, you learn something. And James, I'll answer your question right here because I did not know what a roof washer was, and I didn't know what a debris excluder was, but I could guess at the debris excluder. A roof washer diverts the first flow of water away from a rainwater catchment system. So I had to learn what the first flow of water was. Well, that's when the water hits the roof, that's the first thing that comes off. And what is it that comes with that first wash off the roof? All the debris, the leaves, the branches, everything that was sitting up there. Rainwater catchment system. My wife would love to have that. And some of you, I'd love to hear if you have that. I'd love to know the impact. And in my mind, you spend a lot of time, money, and maintenance installing it, and the only time it has water in it is when it rains, and then you don't need the catchment system. When it's dry, I don't know how much a typical rain barrel is going to hold, call it 50 gallons, 60 gallons. So that'd mean you could do the yard one time. So I'm just not inclined to spend all that time and money on installing a catchment system. But now let's look at the illustration. Coming off the gutter, the downspout, that is a roof a roof washer. it is excluding those leaves. It's got a screen across it. Water comes down, leaf comes down, the water goes through the grill, and the debris goes off and across it. So that's what I learned this time, a roof washer. At first, I just thought it was a kid that went up there and used a pressure washer. Have you ever seen where there was clear evidence that somebody pressure washed their shingles? And they did it for about 5 minutes and they saw the damage they were doing and quit. Might sound like a good idea, but it's terrible. Gutters and downspout installation. Seamed and seamless. If you look at a seamed gutter, you can just about guarantee that the homeowner did it. Done it myself. And then went back and had somebody install the seamless gutters. The seam gutters, excuse me, are shorter sections, and they have pieces that snap together. If it's plastic or riveted, if it's aluminum, it's not a one-person job, though I don't think any gutter installation system is a one-person job, especially the seamless. And you end up with what might be a functional gutter, but it just doesn't last very long because you have all of those joints and they leak or they come off if you don't know how to assemble them properly. It's just almost guaranteed if you have a seamed gutter, you're going to have things to write up. I have seen people, by the way, put the gutter system under roof, and I believe that's simply because it's attached to the roof. But I do put drainage. So then another person made the comment that gutters are amazingly not as expensive as people think. I've been seeing about $3,000 to $4,000 to gutter a whole house. And I've seen that number several times. I don't know what, maybe you're just much more well off than I am and don't consider that a big number. But a lot of the people buying a new home, that's not the first thing they're thinking about. They're going to buy furniture, not gutters. If you've ever watched this, or if you've never watched it, it's pretty fascinating to see them run this flat sheet through there and come out with this long shaped gutter. And I've loved it. That if I'm going to put gutter in, that's what I'm going to do. And in fact, have. Downspouts, gutters and downspout styles. There are a lot of different shapes that basically don't mean too much. I see some of the old, I'm not going to call them antique homes, but the very old homes that might have copper gutters or the quarter round gutters or some of the things that stand out. You see these that have the high square gutters. Some of those are intended to try and catch that water to keep it from running across. If you look at the edge gutter, which is the top center, you see that the leading edge is curled over. And that's just to keep it from being sharp. So it's the back edge that's against your fascia. So you come out here to the C square on the left, top left. And basically a lot of them, the high side is away from the house so that high volume runoff won't overshoot the gutter. But that means with no excluder there, all that first wash takes all that debris down in there. And that's going to block your downspouts. If there are trees and no excluder, you can pretty much guarantee that your gutter's going to be blocked. And when I'm up there on the ladder, on the roof, I'll take a picture of it, but I'll also reach in and take out several handfuls and take pictures of that and show the client if they're there, just what we're pulling out of there, to show them that there is a necessity and is necessary to do some cleaning. The shape is generally for aesthetics, but the reality of it is that there aren't that many shapes that get installed. That edge gutter or the S gutter, I think, are the most common gutter that you see out there, especially on the seamless. Dimensions. Residential is smaller than the commercial. I have seen many houses that would benefit from the commercial size gutter system. The problem is there's just not enough fascia there, not enough surface to mount that 7 to 10 inches of mounting surface on. And that means that you're just almost guaranteed to have a 4-inch gutter system. Materials. Vinyl, Home Depot and Lowe's, if you're going to put it in yourself, just almost guaranteed it's going to be vinyl. Though aluminum is available, most people go with the vinyl because it kind of snaps together and it has a built-in washer. The aluminum needs to be screwed together or riveted together. Makes sense in grading. That's where I have put it for 32 years. It is a roof system. It is not a roof system on residential homes. Jeff, I'm not sure what you're saying there. Can you address where downspouts drain downward onto shingles below? Yes, I actually have an illustration of that. Manufacturers say, don't do it. And did we decide that no gutters is or is not a deficiency? If you follow code to the letter, I would say that gutters are necessary to get it to be a 5-foot runoff. But there is no authority having jurisdiction that I have ever found that insists that gutters are a requirement. Gutters belong in grading and drainage. Thanks, Jeff. He's referring to where I made a comment about a while ago. I put gutters and downspouts in grading and drainage because I believe that's where they belong. Jeff was affirming that. Galvanized. I have seen galvanized on gutters, but only very old ones. Okay. 5 foot is the recommendation. That's from Ken. So Ken, are you saying 5 foot away is not code, but a recommendation? That's not how I read it, but I haven't read it recently. Jeff, only address foundation walls and not slab on grade according to the ICC. Are gutters to be installed behind the drip edge flashing? There is no stipulation for that, but it only makes sense. Otherwise, you have water running over the drip edge behind the gutter where you're going to deteriorate your fascia because it's not drying out. Ken, what I saw in our IRC. So you're saying the IRC said it is a recommendation. I'll have to follow up. Jeff made a comment that he agrees with me regarding the gutters and 5 foot, but the IRC got tainted by builders. I think tainted is a weak word. I think it got swayed big time. Gutters should be installed directly under the drip edge. So the back lip, here's your roof, here's your drip edge, and the gutter should go here so that the water runs off and into the gutter rather than behind where it can come back and do some damage. Did I miss anybody's comment? Okay. Zinc or copper? Very expensive homes I've seen zinc or copper. And it's beautiful, but it still can be damaged. People putting those ladders up. So why do they choose the different materials? I think primarily you're going to see that it's cost. Certainly if you have a homeowner looking at what it's going to take to put it in there, first thing they'll do is say, can I do it myself? And the second thing is, how much will it cost me to have somebody else do it? Aesthetics. Some people pick for aesthetics if they can afford it. It can be installed by a homeowner. A lot of people just aren't going to pay somebody else to do it because it requires special equipment to do that seamless stuff. And then some of it, like me, I recognize that the first time I did it, it's going to cost me more to replace it than just have a professional come in with his equipment and put the seamless system in. All right, so that water runoff should be 5 foot away from the house based on what we've discussed, what the code says, what we believe. And I'm happy if I see a downspout. I'm sorry, if I see an elbow on the bottom of the downspout. And then I'm very happy if I see a splash block. And I'm even happier if I see that splash block actually slopes away from the house rather than down towards the house. Jay Hall, I agree that it seems like gutters should be a requirement, but not once has anybody on the ICC Code Council called me and asked my opinion on that. You actually have a way to offer your opinion, but I doubt they'd listen to us. I think gutters would be great benefit, but that problem still is, you look at that 5 foot away, and how many times are you going to trip over it, mow around it, hit it with your string trimmer, or do something else to damage to get to the point the homeowner's simply going to get away or do away with it. I think the absolute best solution is that it goes directly down into the subsurface drain. But that's money. Subsurface drain. Now, you'll notice that that's a pop-up. I may mention this in a little while, but municipalities don't allow you to cut the curb the way you used to. Okay, Jeff was quoting some code there that directly addresses this, but you'll see the excluder there. It's a little clearer that that open bottom of the downspout is hitting the screen, excluding the leaves. The water filters through, comes to the underground drain, and then comes out to the pop-up at the end. I have seen excluders, but they were in very expensive homes. There's your pop-up, and I said before, the previous slide, they don't allow you to cut that curb. Problem I see with these is those pop-ups break. Sometimes they're washed out by the volume of water I talked about a while ago. Sometimes they're mowed over, stepped on, a lot of different ways to break it. Ideally, they'll go under the sidewalk, so they're closer to the street, but they can go either location. And you'll see that the downspout is dumping into a drain box rather than directly into the underground drain like that. You're going to have to watch for debris there, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, this was the question asked a while ago. Manufacturers of the shingles say don't do it. Their installation instructions say don't do it. And I report it every single time as a deficiency. But the truth of it is that I don't expect anybody to fix it. I know that they're not, because the trade-off for doing it correctly is more downspouts. I know they're going to put the downspout and have it run down the roof to the lower gutter system, or they're going to have more downspouts following the outside of the wall. In one particular case, I counted that it would take 8 downspouts to do it properly, so that this didn't occur. So I pointed out, but I try to differentiate it a little bit. I don't make a big deal about it being a deficiency, expecting that the homeowner will go and tell the seller they've got to fix it, tell the builder they've got to fix it. One time have I actually seen down here where it caused enough of a problem to wear the roof covering out. And it was because there were almost 4 roofs, 3 valleys coming down to that one section, and it flat overwhelmed it. But even if that gutter hadn't been there with its single downspout, it was going to overwhelm it. So the problem was the design of the roof rather than the downspouts. So I always point it out. And then I tell the client that they need to keep an eye on that spot and make sure it doesn't wear out faster. If I do see wear, I report it as a different issue. Now we have damage to the roof cover. I write this under roof cover because it is an impact to the roof. It's not, GAF has Tech Bulletin, so does Certainteed, so does Dow Corning. All of them that I've looked at say this you do not do. And if there's any problem, it's not going to be covered by the manufacturer. Yes, Charlie, I call it out every time, never gets fixed. And we're sitting there with the builder in front of us, and I'll discuss it with the builder, and they say, that's not the way we do it. And those of us as inspectors don't have authority to make them do it. It's got to be the home buyer, and they're happy to get a house. I'm not seeing that they're going to fight that. Okay. Now, I told you that my disclaimer says that I don't do levels or elevations. Well, frankly, in this particular case, there were some things there, and I got into a discussion with it. But you'll see that the left-hand side, I'm on the left-hand photo, the left-hand side of that level is actually below the weep holes, which means water trapped by that walkway can go into the weep holes. You'll see the next one where it was on the top right, it was raining, and these were different houses. I don't always do it, but you know, it just depends. If the client's friendly, sometimes you'll go out of your way. You'll see those are different levels, and that's how I know I did them at different times. For the most part, I stand back and look, and I don't use a level. For this, I did, and it showed clearly that it was wrong. I didn't need a level. You can see the drain clean out on the left by the hose bib. That's vinyl siding. It's sand. It's not even sodded. I don't recall the reason that it was sand and not sod, but because it's vinyl, I know that this is not a new home. You have terrible impact of water on the house. And if you look at the green algae buildup, I don't believe that was because of secondary drainage from the condensate, secondary condensate drainage. But this is a real problem. You'll also see that the only way to establish a drainage swale is going to be take out a lot of dirt. And the homeowner, home buyer, probably doesn't even think about that, but we wouldn't have had that good a picture if it wasn't raining. Top right, there's that drainage swale. It's holding water. Look at how much clearance you have on the slabs. It's very visible on the right-hand house, not so very visible just because of the angle of the picture. But it's not running off. If you have water standing in that low spot, what's stopping it? Well, in that particular case, I believe it was a fence. It was not that picture below, but that picture below shows you exactly the same thing. They had some mud there. Well, the mud had to go away, so they put brick walkway up to the fence. It was, that's not a gate, it was a fence. You have all the rock, you have the sand. They haven't fixed their drainage. All they did was make it a little easier to step on. No gutters. Gutters with a splash block would not have done much good for them, because the typical downspout and elbow and splash block would still have been underneath that roof. So they're still trapping it in that area. The only way to really successfully handle this would be gutters to underground drains, or that 5-foot downspout extension, which wouldn't happen. And here we're talking about those downspouts. No elbow, no splash block. The one on the bottom left, they have directed the water alongside the foundation where it will cause erosion and stay against the foundation. And then you see the erosion on the rightmost picture, and that's not recent. You also look and see that they have plenty of room for some more sod there. They've even eroded all the soil away from the roots of that tree, though, or that shrub. I'm not sure what kind it is. There's a white piece of PVC alongside the house, and I don't recall what that is. And if you don't take care of your gutter's not going to take care of you. You can see that basically the nails failed. And that is a deficiency in the gutter. It is a failure of the gutter system and would have to be reported. So what about if a nail has begun to pull out? I report that as deficient, because if it's pulling out, there's no way to determine how much water is going to take in that gutter to cause it to completely pull out like this one. It also looks like if that nail that I'm seeing down in the lower left corner of the fascia, and then I see a hole in the gutter itself, it looks like they might have used a typical finish nail to hold that in. And I think we can all agree that's not going to work. Houseboat, Ken, yeah, that could have very well been a houseboat. I took a picture. We had a pretty good drainage swale. So somebody was upset with that low, muddy spot. So how long before they start experiencing flooding towards the back of the property? How much time before they start experiencing foundation movement? Remember, 10% expansion on the expansive soils. And they have created condition here that will promote that 10% expansion. You have the illustration, and you see that the downspout is purportedly going directly into that. But to do it that way, you would have to have one pop-up drain per downspout. So usually it comes together in a grid and all goes to the front. But you can also see what I was talking about, how the volume will overwhelm that 4-inch pipe there. It just can't handle the volume of every downspout. You have the yard catch basin. That's one that I have not been able to find in my yard. And what you don't see under that is there is typically a cloth. It's just a yard cloth to help catch the dirt and the gravel before it washes down there. And you see the pop-up is right at the street. And this was new construction, and this was their new sod, and they were well on their way to have completely buried that. Is there a time frame that I tell my clients to allow for water to drain to determine if there's poor drainage? I think water should be gone from the house in about 4 hours after it has stopped raining. That should be enough for water to run out. Think about draining a bathtub. That's an awful lot of water. Now, yeah, the ground is going to absorb some of it. How much it absorbs depends on how long it has rained. So a first rain in a dry summer, 4 hours. If it's been raining for a long time, it's anyone's guess. Another thing to watch is when one home has a lawn irrigation system and another doesn't. Not quite sure what you mean, but the one with yard irrigation can impact yours if they don't have good drainage and they spray their water too often and it runs into your yard. That can impact it. If your drainage swale is proper, then the drainage swale stays wet rather than actually impacting your foundation. High soil, no question. A cement board on the left. I don't know why they put that rock there. I really don't. You have all the brick. That was because I don't have any reason for them to have done that. No clue. High soil, that's garden mulch. I'm sure we've all seen when you come into a home where the agent told them, do some landscaping to improve the yard, to improve the curb appeal. And you walk up and they have added way too much mulch and it covers all the weep holes. I put this in grading and drainage because that has an impact on your soil. It has an impact on the drainage. If they put a lot of mulch there, it's going to trap it. Some shrubs take water out of the soil. Some shrubs, I'm told, I haven't found one that really does, keeps the water in the soil. But it also affects your ability to observe the foundation. So if I have heavy shrubs, I report it under grading and drainage. Now, in new construction, you'll have the landscaper who'll come in with his little 1-gallon shrub that's supposed to grow up as big as these, and he'll put them about 12 to 16 inches away from the slab. And that's because if they put them out with the root ball 3 feet away, it's going to look ugly until it grows up. So I'll tell my clients that before they've rooted, they ought to pull those that are close because they're usually done in 2 rows, 2 types in 2 rows. You have the back that grows up big, the front that grows small. I tell them to take those shrubs before they've rooted and put them someplace else if they're thinking about landscaping their backyard. And I've talked to the builders and I've talked to the landscapers, and they don't care. They're doing it for the curb appeal at the time the house is being sold. Poor drainage and high soil. That's flat as can be. It's in the re-entrant corner of a house. Don't have any information from the photograph on whether there were downspouts or gutters or not, but that's not going to do anything but hold that. Same thing with the upper right. That is an irrigation line, and at the bottom, you see that there's some flat work. So you have this area between the brick and the flat work, like a sidewalk or a walkway. And they've created a dam, and they filled the dam with mulch, and it's over the weep holes. I think we've all inspected a home or two like that. And you have to say, I don't know how it's going to drain. If you're not there to watch it until they do their landscaping, until they do anything. So I report this as a deficiency, and say you should expect that there's going to be poor drainage. Well, to me, not a one of those are good, including the one that's got that semi-S there, because that's sending it straight down the drive. And as it goes down the drive, you're going to have an impact on the flat work there itself. You've already seen this picture. That's the one he was asking about, a houseboat. All right. So new construction, and the homeowner says, I'm going to sod the back myself. But it doesn't take a few rains, even one heavy rain that hits that sand, that eliminates all of your drainage swale. Because remember, that type A drainage drains from the back fence and from the house, and it hits that, all the sand moves to the middle. The low spot is now eliminated. So I tell the homeowner in my report that they may have to regrade before they put the sod down if they don't put the sod down immediately. Jeff says there is no time limit for the stormwater. I said 4 hours. He said no accumulation whatsoever. I think you're going to find that the absorption takes care of a lot of it, but I can't tell you. I say 4 hours. Jeff says 0. Here's where you have the deterioration behind the gutter. I don't know anything about the drip edge. From this picture and the shiny spot near the top of the page, it looks like this does not have a metal drip edge, roof edge flashing, and it's just the wooden drip edge that's deteriorated. And you can see the gutter, the nail pulling out at the lower left, but you also see that the roof, no, that's a brick, never mind. But you see the nails are pulling out. Somebody made a smart aleck comment about Jeff living in San Antonio and the fact that there is no water accumulation there. You've seen that picture before. They put all that rock there. It doesn't help drainage. It doesn't help high grade, doesn't stop water intrusion, and it conducive condition for termites. Left-hand side is the front porch, where the porch drops down from the house about 4 inches anyway, and there's no provision, so it's just automatically at that front porch too high. This is great. Let's just come in and build some garden beds. Now, that slab is built up there, but we don't know what cracks are there. We don't know what it does with the water. You see that it's got a scupper at the right-hand picture at the bottom. No guarantee it works. And that's what I say. There's no guarantee it works. I can't tell you anything about it. Though they do have the angel out there. I guess that's angels praying for good drainage. What's this likely to be? Chances are great, not just good, but great, that is foundation repair. And the homeowner's probably never going to touch it again, but that eliminated any drainage that might have been there. Missing downspout, failure of the gutters, a deterioration of the fascia, no excluder, and you have the leaves are set, or the gutters full of leaves. It's 5 foot away from part of the roof, but it really should have a downspout. This is a case of, you can see the high soil, but you just sort of sit back and look at that. And even without my tools, I don't think that's good drainage. All right, these are the catch basins. Somebody spent a lot of money on it. I just don't want the hassle of maintenance. Again, somebody spent a lot of money on it. And it's cute, it's beautiful, but it doesn't protect your foundation. All right, the one on the left, that's not 5 feet, guys. I don't care what you say, that's not 5 feet. And the other two are dumping the
That's the
water.
one at your house, Clay?
That was a profile of me, a silhouette of me. And the one on the middle and the one on the right, look at the one on the right. In terms of protecting your foundation, that does zero good, but it is beautiful. All right, what do you know? I am right on time, unless somebody's got questions.
All right, anybody, you can speak up or forever hold your peace, as we say.
And I do appreciate the feedback we had.
Yeah, great participation tonight. I appreciate all of you getting on with us, and I hope that you gained something from this. And Clay, I want to tell you, thank you for such a great presentation. Very knowledgeable. It looks like you really have some great homes that you've been inspecting. And may the rest of the week not have the drainage issues that you've seen.